He didn't just insult her. He stood in the cramped boys' quarters of their Lagos compound, with his mother-mama Chitty watching from behind his shoulder like a sentinel of judgment, and poured a bucket of filthy mop water, gray, reeking of bleach and 3 days of grime, over the woman who had been quietly carrying his entire existence on her back. That morning, Adaeze Okafor walked into her own home after an all-night negotiation session. Just hours after receiving confirmation that the historic $10 billion oil deal would be announced in 48 hours, and less than 2 days before all of Nigeria would know her name, she was exhausted, hopeful, and finally ready to stop hiding who she really was. Instead, she found Chitty waiting with rage in his eyes and his mother beside him, armed with manufactured evidence and a lifetime of poison. "Where were you? Which man's bed did you crawl out of this time?" he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. In his hand, his phone displayed a single photo, Adaeze speaking with a male colleague outside her office building. What he didn't know was that the picture was staged, timed, and framed by the very woman whose hand now rested triumphantly on his shoulder. He thought he was punishing an unfaithful wife. He thought his mother's accusations were truth wrapped in maternal concern. He thought Adaeze was just a disloyal secretary who finally got exposed. What he never imagined was this: the woman he had just drenched in filthy water was the lead architect of West Africa's biggest oil merger. A woman who had already gathered every document, every recording, every piece of evidence she needed, not just to walk away with dignity, but to bring everything around them crashing down in broad daylight. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Adaeze's voice be drowned out by lies and letting bullies win. When you click that button, you stand with every person falsely accused, every partner humiliated in their own home, and every quiet soul planning their comeback. Please subscribe now and, in the comments, tell me where you're watching from. The pen slipped from Adaeze Okafor's fingers. It wasn't because she was clumsy. It wasn't because she was tired. It was because of the weight of everything she had built, everything she had sacrificed, everything she had protected in silence was about to change in less than 48 hours. Adaeze, 34 years old, respected senior negotiator and lead architect of a historic corporate merger, sat at the polished conference table alone. The room was pristine, sterile, and cold. The kind of cold that reminded her how far she had climbed from the cramped one-room apartment in Surulere, where she grew up. She blinked at the documents before her, contracts worth $10 billion. Her signature line waited, neat, impatient, like it knew it controlled the next chapter of her life. Her phone buzzed beside her. One word flashed on the screen: tonight. Her chest tightened. To the audience, this message isn't mysterious. It's the confirmation from her mentor and legal team that the final internal signing would happen tonight, and the public press conference would follow in 48 hours. Adaeze was hours away from cementing the deal and from finally telling her husband the truth. But for the audience, this is also the moment to truly understand who she is. Adaeze did not inherit her success. She did not marry into power. She fought for every inch of her career. At 19, she sits on a mattress on the floor in Surulere, textbooks stacked around her like protective walls. Her widowed mother, a petty trader in Balagan Market, counts coins by candlelight before heading out for the night shift. "You will not struggle like me, my daughter. Education is your weapon." At 24, she rejects a lucrative job offer because it would have kept her tied to a manager known for harassing female junior staff. She chooses growth over comfort, integrity over shortcuts. At 28, her mentor, Chief Adebayo Ogunlai, tells her in a glass-walled office overlooking Victoria Island, "You have the mind of a strategist and the patience of a hunter, Adaeze. You belong in the war rooms, not behind reception desks." At 31, she meets Chitty at a friend's wedding in Lekki. He's kind then, attentive, warm, funny, someone who seems to genuinely listen. His insecurity shows even then how he flinches whenever colleagues praise her intelligence at social gatherings. But she convinces herself love can hold that weight. Over 3 years of marriage, she rises. Late nights, cold boardrooms, endless negotiations. She becomes the person oil executives and government ministers bring in when billion-dollar deals hang in the balance. But in the heavy, painful choice, she hides her full success from Chitty, so he never feels diminished. She keeps promotions quiet. She downplays bonuses. She always says just a small task at work when he asks about her late nights. She pays most of the household bills from accounts in her professional name. The house in Adaeze is largely funded by her salary, but she never throws it in his face. She thinks protecting his pride means protecting the marriage. Tonight was supposed to be the night she stops shrinking. Tonight, she would finalize the merger internally. In 48 hours, she would stand before cameras at Eco Hotel. And somewhere in between, she planned to finally tell Chitty the truth. Her phone suddenly buzzed again, sharp and insistent. The name on the screen froze her blood. Mama Chitty. Missed calls, 5. Mama Chitty rarely called more than once. 5 missed calls meant something calculated, not casual. Adaeze stared at the screen too long, her finger hovering over the return call button. Something cold settled in her stomach, but she pushed it away. She had a deal to finalize. She had a future to step into. Whatever Mama Chitty wanted could wait. The storm had already begun long before Adaeze noticed the sky darkening. Across Lagos, in a modest compound in Surulere, Mama Chitty was already shaping a story, one that would crawl into Chitty's mind and turn the man Adaeze loved into a stranger she would not recognize by morning. The shouting hit first. A sharp, angry voice tore through the quiet evening before the audience even saw who it belonged to. "I don't believe it, Chitty. She thinks she can make a fool out of this family." The voice belonged to Mama Chitty, Chitty's mother, a woman in her late 50s. Sharp-eyed, sharp-tongued, and sharper still in the ways she controlled the people around her. She stood in the small sitting room with her hands on her hips, breathing hard, her wrapper tied tight around her waist, her face set with fury. Even when silent, Mama Chitty radiated intensity. Chitty Okafor, 36, Adaeze's husband, stood in front of her, tense, shoulders stiff. At work, he managed bank teams and loan portfolios, used to people listening when he spoke. But in front of his mother, he reverted to the frightened boy he once was. "Mama, what happened? What are you talking about?" he asked, voice tight. Mama Chitty didn't want calm. She wanted control. Her rage cooled into a low, deliberate tone, the kind that made her words feel heavier than any shout. Mama Chitty's hatred did not begin tonight. It had years behind it. When Chitty was 7, he sits on the kitchen floor crying as his father slams the door and walks out without explanation. Mama Chitty collapses beside him, clutching him too tightly. "I'll never let anyone take you away from me, Chitty. Never. You're all I have." The promise grows into something dark. When Chitty was 16, he tries to attend a school excursion to Adaeze. Mama Chitty blocks the door, tears streaming. "You don't need anyone but me. They'll all leave you eventually, just like your father did." He stays. When Chitty was 31, he tells his mother he's getting married.
"Mama kidis mile evaporates instantly."
"She's stealing you, just like your father left me. You're abandoning me too." From that moment, Mama Chitty sees Adaeze not as a daughter-in-law, but as a thief, someone taking her son's loyalty, someone replacing her. For 3 years, she drops little comments like poison in water. "She's always out late, Chitty. What kind of wife? She thinks she's better than us with her office talk. Mark my words, she'll leave when she finds someone richer." Chitty laughed them off at first. But water on stone always wins eventually. Now Mama Chitty sits on the sofa, breathing steadier, anger reshaped into calculation. She pats the cushion beside her, and Chitty sits, frowning. "Mama, just tell me what you think you saw," he says carefully. Mama Chitty reaches into her handbag. Her movements are precise, controlled, practiced. "Not what I think I saw," she says softly. "What I recorded." She pulls out her phone, swipes deliberately, and holds it up. A photo of Adaeze standing outside her Victoria Island office building with a male colleague, talking closely. The photo is taken from across the street.
Zoomed in.
From this angle, without context, it looks intimate, like a secret. The audience understands the truth. Mama Chitty had gone to the office area weeks ago. Suspicious. She watched from a bucceteria window until she saw Adaeze walk out with a man. She waited for the closest moment, a laugh, a casual touch on the elbow, and clicked. Chitty stares at the photo too long. His hands shake. Where did you get this? Mama Chitty leans closer, voice warm. Too warm. I was near your wife's office last week. She didn't see me, of course. She was too busy. She swipes again. Another picture. She's been secretive, hasn't she? Late nights, phone always on silent, telling you it's just work. Chitty's throat tightens. Recent weeks flash through his mind. Adaeze leaving before sunrise. Pulling her laptop away when he walks past. Smiling at phone notifications, then quickly locking the screen. Mama Chitty's voice cuts through his thoughts, soft and deadly. Tonight, you'll see the truth. Let her walk into her own exposure. She wasn't protecting her son. She was protecting her ownership. Adaeze left that conference room believing she had 48 hours to change her life. She had less than 8 hours before it would be destroyed. The early morning air hung heavy with Lagos humidity as she drove through empty streets, her headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. The signing had gone perfectly. Chief Ogunlai's handshake had been firm, his smile proud. History, Adaeze. You've made history tonight. But now, exhaustion is pressed down on her shoulders like physical weight. She glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes red-rimmed, makeup faded, the elegant blazer she'd worn to the sign now wrinkled. She reached for the modest wrapper folded on the passenger seat, the one she always kept in her car. Years of survival had taught her this ritual. Before entering the compound, transform. Hide the designer clothes under traditional fabric. Wipe away the confidence. Become smaller, quieter, less threatening. She wrapped the fabric around her waist over her work clothes, covering the expensive label, erasing the evidence of her other life. As she pulled into the compound in Adaeze, she rehearsed the words in her mind. Chitty, I need to show you something. I've been protecting you, but I was wrong to hide. There's a press conference in 2 days. My face will be on every screen in Nigeria. I'm the lead negotiator for the oil merger. I'm about to become CEO. I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid you'd feel diminished, afraid it would break us. But hiding has been breaking us anyway. She practiced saying it with love, with apology, with hope that maybe, just maybe, he could celebrate with her instead of collapsing under the weight of her success. The compound was quiet. Too quiet. Usually at this hour, the neighbor's generator would be humming, someone would be sweeping the corridor. But now, silence pressed against her ears like a warning she couldn't quite interpret. She walked toward the boys' quarters where they'd banished her to sleep 6 months ago. Mama Chitty's idea, of course, claiming the main bedroom needed to be preserved when a real wife who produces children entered the family. Adaeze had accepted it without protest, too tired to fight, too focused on closing the deal to wage war at home. Her hand reached for the door handle. Before she could turn it, the door swung open from inside. Chitty stood there, face twisted with something she'd never seen before, rage mixed with pain mixed with something darker, something final. Behind him, Mama Chitty stood like a shadow made solid, arms crossed, mouth set in grim satisfaction. Where were you? Chitty's voice came out strangled, barely controlled. Which man's bed did you crawl out of this time? Adaeze froze. The wrapper suddenly felt like a costume, like evidence of her own deception, though not the deception he imagined. Chitty, I was at work. Let me explain. Explain? Mama Chitty's voice cut through the air, like a blade. Explain this. She thrust a phone toward Adaze's face, showing photos Adaeze had never seen, herself with Aaron outside the office, the angel making innocent professional interaction look intimate, damning. I saw you climbing out of a strange man's car at 3 a.m. Mama Chitty's voice rose to a shriek. Ashawo, you think my son is a fool. Adaeze opened her mouth to defend herself, to explain about NDAs and confidential meetings and colleague Aaron, who was happily married with 3 children, but Chitty wasn't looking at her face. He was looking past her, through her, at some narrative his mother had already written in his mind. His eyes fell on the bucket by the door, gray water, reeking of bleach, and 3 days of mopping the corridor. Their neighbor's bucket, left there after cleaning. Chitty's hand moved toward it, and Adaeze understood with crystal clarity that words would not save her now. She saw it in his eyes. He had already decided she was guilty. He grabbed the bucket, and the world slowed down. At that moment, Chitty didn't just pour water. He poured 3 years of insecurity, his mother's poison, and his own cowardice. The bucket tilted. Adaeze watched it happen as if from outside her own body. The gray liquid arcing through the dawn air, catching the first rays of sunlight filtering through the compound. Then it hit.
Cold.
Filthy. The water cascaded over her head, soaking through her wrapper, through the expensive blazer she'd hidden beneath, through her skin, through everything she thought she knew about the man she'd married. The smell of bleach burned her nostrils. Dirty mop water, 3 days of grime, of corridor floors, of other people's footprints. Dripped from her hair, her face, her clothes. A shawo. Useless woman. Disgrace. Mama Chitty's voice rose in triumphant cackling, the sound of a woman who'd finally won a war she'd been fighting since the day Adaeze entered her son's life. Chitty's voice joined hers, cruel in a way she'd never heard before. You think you can make a fool of me? You think I'm stupid? Walking in here at dawn with your lies? His face was twisted with righteous anger, the anger of a man who believed he was defending his honor, who had no idea he was destroying his own future. Adaeze stood perfectly still. Water dripped from her chin, from her fingertips, pooling at her feet on the concrete floor. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't defend herself. What was the point? He hadn't asked for her side. He hadn't paused to consider her character, her 3 years of loyalty, her exhaustion from working to pay his bills while he questioned her worth. He had simply believed. Believed his mother over his wife. Believed his staged photo over 3 years of faithfulness. Believed the worst, because believing the worst was easier than questioning the woman who'd raised him. She wiped her face slowly with trembling hands, pushing the filthy water from her eyes. The wrapper clung to her body, heavy with water and humiliation. Her designer blazer, the one she'd worn to sign documents that would reshape West African energy policy, was ruined. But something else was ruined too, something that could never be cleaned, never be restored. She looked at Chitty, really looked at him. This man who once called her his queen. This man who'd promised to protect her, honor her, stand beside her. He stood there now with an empty bucket in his hands, and his mother's satisfied smile reflected in his eyes, and Adaeze saw him clearly for the first time. Her eyes met his, empty of tears, empty of pleading, empty of everything except resolve. When she spoke, her voice came out quiet, deadly calm. The voice of someone who'd just made a decision that couldn't be unmade. You will remember this day, Chitty. Both of you will remember what you've done. The words hung in the air like a prophecy. Mama Chitty's laughter faltered for just a moment. Something in Adaeze's tone penetrated even her triumph. Something cold, something final, something that sounded less like a threat and more like a simple statement of fact. Adaeze turned. She walked out of the boys' quarters, out of the compound, her head somehow still high despite the filth dripping from her hair, staining the ground with every step. Her car keys were still clutched in her hand, miraculously dry in her closed fist. Behind her, she heard Mama Chitty's voice resume its victory speech, heard Chitty's heavy breathing as the adrenaline of righteous anger began to fade. They watched her go, standing in the doorway like judges who'd passed sentences. They believed they'd won. They believed they'd put her in her place, exposed her shame, and reclaimed control. They had no idea that the woman walking away from them, soaked in dirty water and humiliation, was about to become untouchable. They had no idea they'd just freed her.
Adaeze could have called her lawyer right then.
She could have told Chitty the truth that same morning. But she didn't. Because she understood something they never would. Justice delayed is sometimes amplified. She sat in her car alone, still dripping with dirty water. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Through the windshield, she could see the compound gate, could still hear the echo of Mama Chitty's triumphant laughter ringing in her ears. Her breathing came slow, measured, and deliberate. Not the breathing of someone breaking down. The breathing of someone calculating. The expensive leather seats would be ruined. She didn't care. Some stains marked endings, and endings, she was learning, could be gifts disguised as destruction. Her phone sat in the cup holder, miraculously dry. She picked it up, stared at the screen. 47 unread messages from the signing ceremony group chat. Congratulations pouring in from colleagues, government officials, international partners. History made tonight. Proud to work with you. Nigeria's future is brighter because of you. The contrast was almost funny. Almost. In one world, she was making history. In another, she was being drenched in mop water and called a prostitute. The two realities couldn't coexist. One of them had to die. She scrolled back to Chief Ogunlai's message from hours ago. The deal will be announced in 48 hours.
You'll be named CEO.
Press conference at Eco Hotel, 8 a.m., day after tomorrow. Every major news outlet in Nigeria will be there. 48 hours. That's how long she had until every screen in Lagos, in Nigeria, in West Africa would show her face. Until Chitty and Mama Chitty would learn exactly who they'd just humiliated. She could tell them now. Drive back. Show them her phone. Let them see the contracts, the emails, the proof of who she really was. Watch their faces crumble. Watch Mama Chitty's triumphant smile dissolve into horror. Watch Chitty fall to his knees and beg forgiveness. But that justice would be small. Private. Forgettable. Her decision crystallized like ice forming on water. I will not tell them yet. I will let them continue. I will let them think they've destroyed me. I will let them spread their rumors, send their insults, celebrate their victory. And when the truth comes, she started the car, her hands steady now. When the truth comes, it will come like thunder. She drove through empty Lagos streets, the city just beginning to wake. She didn't go home to her mother's place in Surulere. She didn't go to a friend's house. She pulled into the Weebaker Hotel in Ikoyi, checked in under her professional name, the name that would soon be known nationwide, the name Chitty had never heard her use. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly at Adeze's appearance, the wet wrapper, the soaked clothes, the smell of bleach. But this was Lagos. This was a 5-star hotel. Discretion was purchased with the room rate. Welcome, Mrs. Okafor. Your executive suite is ready. In the bathroom, Adaeze stood under the shower for 30 minutes. She watched the dirty water circle the drain, brown, gray, carrying away 3 years of making herself smaller, 3 years of hiding, 3 years of believing that love meant letting yourself be diminished. The water ran clear eventually, but something in her had changed permanently. She stepped out, wrapped herself in the hotel's plush robe, and made a phone call. Ngozi? Her assistant's voice came through instantly, alert despite the early hour.
Ma.
I've been worried. The signing went well. I saw the messages in the group chat. The signing was perfect. Adaeze cut in, her voice cool and certain. I need you to do something for me.
Today.
Before noon. Anything, Ma. Go to the house in Aja. My house. Move everything that belongs to me out. Everything.
Clotte, document, joaillerie, photo.
Leave nothing. Not an earring. Not a memory. Hire movers if you need to. I'll send you the address of a storage facility. Silence on the other end. Then, carefully. Ma, is everything okay? Adaeze looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her natural hair was wet, plastered to her skull. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. Her face looked different somehow, sharper, clearer, like someone had wiped away a fog she hadn't known was there. Check the security cameras I had installed 6 months ago, she said quietly. The ones in the boys' quarters, the compound, the sitting room. Make sure everything from the past 6 months is backed up. Multiple drives. Cloud storage. Everything. Her assistant's voice changed, understanding dawning. The hidden cameras. The ones you installed when things started getting worse. Yes. Make sure we have every frame. Every conversation. Every insult. Every lie. Adaeze's reflections stared back at her, unflinching. Ngozi, this is very important. When you go to the house, if anyone asks where I am, if my husband or his mother tries to stop you, yes, Ma? Tell them nothing. You don't know where I am. You're just following instructions. Let them think I've disappeared. Let them think I'm somewhere crying, broken, ashamed. A pause. Then her assistant's voice came back, fierce and loyal. Ma, are you okay? Really? Adaeze smiled for the first time since the bucket tilted. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a general who'd just seen the battlefield and knew exactly where to place her pieces. I will be, she said. In 48 hours, I will be better than okay. I will be free. For 48 hours, 2 different worlds existed. In one, Adaeze prepared to make history. In the other, Chitty and Mama Chitty celebrated what they thought was victory. Adaeze's world moved with quiet precision. The Wheatbaker suite became her war room. She stood before the full-length mirror in the hotel as stylists pinned and adjusted her custom gold osso oak, the fabric shimmering under the lights like liquid sunrise. The gelly wrapped around her head transformed her, not into someone new, but into who she'd always been beneath the shrinking. Her makeup artist worked in silence, understanding without being told that this wasn't vanity. This was armor. Madam, you look like royalty, the woman whispered, stepping back. Adaeze stared at her reflection. She did look like royalty. More than that, she looked like power that had finally stopped apologizing for existing. Chief Ogunlai arrived that afternoon for final document review. They sat in the suite's living area, contracts spread across the coffee table like maps of a new world. This will change West African energy policy for a generation, he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades in the industry. 50,000 jobs. Energy independence. Nigeria leading instead of following. He looked at her carefully. Are you ready for what comes after? The attention, the pressure, the spotlight. Adaeze thought about dirty water dripping from her hair, about her husband's face twisted with manufactured righteousness, about 3 years of making herself invisible. I've been preparing for this my entire life, she said quietly. I just didn't know it. That evening, Ngozi arrived with updates. Everything had been moved from the Aja house. 3 moving vans. Ma, you wouldn't believe how much was yours. The furniture, the kitchen appliances, even the generator. Your name on every receipt. She paused. He asked where you were. Your husband. He was agitated. Not worried. Agitated. Like he was angry you hadn't come back to apologize. Adaeze felt nothing hearing this. That was the surprising part, the absolute absence of pain. And my mother-in-law? She was telling the neighbors you'd run away with a man. That you'd been caught. That's a good riddance to bad rubbish. Ngozi's voice hardened. Ma, the security footage. I've seen it. All of it. What she did, what she said, is backed up. Multiple locations. Cloud, external drives, my personal laptop. That footage is safer than the president's secrets. Adaeze stood on her new balcony that night in the luxury apartment her company had arranged in Banana Island. The apartment came with the CEO position. Furnished, modern, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos Lagoon. She allowed herself one moment of quiet, one moment to feel the weight of what was coming. Tomorrow morning, everything will change. Her phone would ring endlessly. Her face would be on every screen. And somewhere in Aja, in a house she'd paid for, 2 people who'd thought they'd destroyed her would learn the truth. Across the city, Chitty and Mama Chitty's world was smaller, meaner, wrapped in the comfortable delusion of victory. Chitty sat in his sitting room that first night, Adaeze's phone number going straight to a disconnected message. He tried calling 17 times. Not from worry, from irritation.
She was supposed to come back by now.
Supposed to beg. Supposed to realize she had nowhere else to go. She thinks she can just disappear, he muttered to his mother. Mama Chitty smiled from her chair, peeling oranges with deliberate satisfaction. Let her go, my son. Let her run to whatever man she's been sneaking around with. You'll find a better wife. A respectful one. One who knows her place. The next day, Chitty texted insults to Adaeze's old number, not knowing it was already disconnected. Don't bother coming back. You're nothing without this family. I should have listened to my mother from the beginning. You were always too proud. Good luck finding another man stupid enough to marry a woman like you. Each message felt like reclaiming power. Each message was sent into a void that didn't care. Mama Chitty, meanwhile, held court with the neighbors. Mrs. Okonkwo, Mrs. Adaeze, anyone who would listen. My son finally exposed her. She was cheating, you know. I caught her with my own eyes. Coming home at strange hours, meeting men. The neighbors clucked sympathetically, though Mrs. Okonkwo's eyes held something else. A glint of knowledge withheld, a secret smile that Mama Chitty was too triumphant to notice. That evening, they ate together, jollof rice and chicken that Chitty had bought from a nearby restaurant because Adaeze wasn't there to cook. They laughed over dinner, mother and son, the way they used to before Adaeze entered their lives. She'll come crawling back when she realizes no one else will take her, Mama Chitty said, spooning rice into her mouth. That's when we make her sign over her secretary salary to contribute properly to this household. No more of this I'm tired from work nonsense. She'll learn to submit. Chitty nodded, feeling righteous, feeling like a man who defended his honor. He slept peacefully that night in the bed Adaeze had paid for, under the roof Adaeze had maintained, in the house Adaeze had turned into a home. He had no nightmares.
No premonition.
No sense that in less than 12 hours, every screen in Lagos would show his wife's face beside government ministers and international oil executives. No sense that the woman he drenched in dirty water was about to be named one of the most powerful people in Nigeria. No sense that his mother's lies were about to collide with a truth so massive it would flatten everything in its path. Mama Chitty planned the next phase over tea the following morning, just hours before the press conference. When she begs to return, we make conditions. She quits that office job. She stays home. She learns to be a proper wife. Neither of them noticed the date circled on the business calendar Adaeze had left behind, deliberately perhaps. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. A single note in her handwriting. Press conference. Everything changes. The universe was holding its breath. In a hotel ballroom across the city, chairs were being arranged for journalists. Cameras were being tested. A podium was being positioned. And Adaeze Okafor was putting on her gold Oso-oak one final time, checking her appearance, preparing to step into the light she'd hidden from for 3 years. The calm before the storm wasn't calm at all. It was a potential energy wound so tight that when it finally released, the shockwave would be felt in every corner of Lagos. At exactly 8 a.m. on a Thursday morning, Adaeze Okafor's face appeared on every screen in Lagos. And two people's world ended in real time. The Eco Hotel ballroom blazed with camera flashes. Journalists packed every seat, cameras lined the back wall, and the energy in the room crackled with anticipation. This wasn't just another press conference. This was history being made, and everyone in that room knew it. Adaeze walked onto the stage in her gold Oso-oak, the fabric catching the lights, her geli wrapped high and regal. Government ministers flanked her left side. International oil executives stood to her right. Chief Ogunlai beamed with paternal pride from his seat in the front row. She reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly into the cameras. Her voice, when it came, was steady and powerful, the voice of someone who'd found herself after years of hiding. Good morning. On behalf of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and our international partners from Shell, Total Energies, and ExxonMobil, I am honored to announce the completion of the West African Energy Alliance, a historic $10 billion merger that will transform our energy sector, create 50,000 direct jobs, and position Nigeria as the leading energy hub in West Africa. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters leaned forward, already typing headlines on their phones. Adaeze continued, her words precise, her presence commanding. She spoke about energy independence, about economic transformation, about the 3 years of confidential negotiations that had brought them to this moment. She spoke and the nation listened. Within minutes, the news spread like wildfire. Blog posts went live. Nigerian woman leads historic $10 billion oil merger. Television stations interrupted regular programming. Radio hosts announced it breathlessly between songs. Social media exploded. Sandwiches of Adaeze at the podium, threads analyzing what this meant for Nigeria's economy, videos of her speech being shared thousands of times per minute. Lead negotiator Adaeze Okafor, newly appointed CEO of the West African Energy Alliance subsidiary, operated under a professional pseudonym for security reasons during the 3-year negotiation process. The anchors couldn't hide their excitement. This was the biggest economic news in a decade. In a bank in Victoria Island, Chidi sat in the break room during his lunch hour. His jollof rice was halfway to his mouth when the television mounted on the wall switched from a morning show to breaking news. He barely glanced up at first, just another government announcement, another politician making promises. Then he saw her face. The fork clattered against his plastic plate, rice scattering across the table. His colleague, Emeka, turned to look at the screen.
Then at Chidi.
Then back at the screen. Chidi, isn't that your wife? Chidi couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what he was seeing. That was Adaeze. His Adaeze. The secretary. The woman who said just a small task at work when he asked about her late nights. But she wasn't standing at the secretary's desk. She was standing at a podium surrounded by people whose faces he recognized from newspaper front pages and evening news. His hands shook violently as he grabbed his phone, fingers fumbling to search her name. The results flooded his screen, hundreds of articles, all published in the last 10 minutes. Adaeze Okafor, the quiet architect behind Nigeria's biggest oil deal. From secret negotiations to CEO, the woman who changed West African energy policy. 3-year confidential merger. Lead negotiator's identity finally revealed. He clicked frantically, reading fragments his brain could barely comprehend. Operating under strict NDAs and a professional pseudonym for security reasons. Salary package estimated at 500 million Nigerian nairas annually. Mansion in Banana Island provided by the consortium. Youngest CEO in the sector's history. His colleague was reading over his shoulder now, his voice dropping to an awed whisper. Chidi, that's your wife. That's actually your wife. Do you know what this means? Do you know who she is? Chidi stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. His tie suddenly felt like a noose. The break room walls were closing in. Other colleagues were gathering now, pointing at the television, pulling out their phones, searching, confirming. Isn't that Chidi's wife? The one who lives in Aja? He never said she was. He ran. Tie flying behind him, dress shoes pounding against the marble bank floor, past customers, past his supervisor calling his name, through the glass doors and into the Lagos morning heat. He had to get home, had to think, had to understand how the woman he'd poured dirty water on 2 days ago was the same woman now making international news. In Surulere, Mama Chidi was having a slower morning. She'd woken late, feeling victorious, feeling like order had been restored to her world. Her son was free from that proud, disrespectful woman. Soon he'd find a proper wife, someone humble, someone grateful, someone who understood a mother's place in her son's life. She was frying plantains when she heard the knock. Aggressive, urgent, not the polite tap of a neighbor asking to borrow salt. She opened the door to find Mrs. Okonkwo standing there, phone clutched in her hand, face split between shock and barely suppressed glee.
Mama Chidi. Mama Chidi.
Have you seen? Have you heard? Heard what? Why are you shouting like a mad woman? Mrs. Okonkwo thrust her phone forward, the screen showing Adaeze in gold osso oak, surrounded by dignitaries, cameras flashing. Your daughter-in-law. She's on every television in Nigeria. She's been announced as the CEO of Mama Chitty. She negotiated a $10 billion oil deal. She's one of the most powerful women in Nigeria. The phone slipped from Mrs. Okonkwo's hand. Mama Chitty caught it by instinct, staring at the screen, at Adeze's face, at the headlines scrolling beneath, at the words that made no sense. Historic merger, lead negotiator, CEO appointment, 500 million Nigerian nairas salary package. Her legs buckled. She grabbed the doorframe for support, the phone tumbling from her fingers to the concrete floor. Mrs. Okonkwo kept talking, her voice rising with excitement and something else, the particular joy of watching someone's schemes backfire spectacularly. They're saying she's been working on this for 3 years. That she kept it secret for security. That she's moving to Banana Island. Mama Chitty, the woman you called useless. Get out. Mama Chitty's voice came out strangled. What? Get out of my house. She slammed the door in Mrs. Okonkwo's stunned face, then collapsed against it, sliding down to sit on her floor. The plantains burning in the kitchen filled the air with smoke. She didn't notice. Her mind was replaying every insult, every scheme, every lie she'd told about Adaeze. The useless secretary, the barren woman, the one who thought she was better than everyone, except she was better. She was powerful beyond anything Mama Chitty had imagined. And 2 days ago, Mama Chitty had orchestrated her humiliation. She began to wail, not from grief, but from pure, crystallizing panic. The kind of panic that comes when you realize you've destroyed something irreplaceable, burned a bridge you desperately need, made an enemy of someone who could crush you without effort. Her phone began ringing. Neighbors calling. Church members calling. Her sister calling from Enugu. Everyone had seen. Everyone knew. And everyone would remember what Mama Chitty had been saying about her daughter-in-law for the past 2 days. The accusations of infidelity, the public gloating, the rumors spread with such confidence. Across Lagos, in the house in Aja that Adaeze had paid for, Chitty burst through the door. Adaeze. Adaeze. His voice echoed through empty rooms. He ran from bedroom to sitting room to kitchen, throwing open doors, searching. Her closet, empty. Her toiletries gone. Her books, her photos, even the small things like her favorite mug and the decorative pillows she'd chosen, vanished. The only things remaining were his belongings and his mother's. Everything that had made this place a home. Everything that had made it warm. Everything that had carried her presence erased. He sank to the floor of their bedroom, his bedroom now. Phone in his trembling hand. He dialed her number. The number you have dialed is not available. He tried again. Same message. Again. Again. His breath came in gasps. On his phone screen, another notification. A video clip from the press conference. Adeze's voice clear and confident. This merger represents not just economic transformation, but a shift in how we see ourselves as Nigerians, as Africans, as leaders in the global energy sector. The woman speaking looked like his wife, but sounded like a stranger. Or maybe, the thought crept in like poison, maybe this was who she'd always been, and he'd been too small, too insecure, too controlled by his mother's fears to ever truly see her. His jollof rice from 2 nights ago, the rice he'd shared with his mother while they laughed about Adeze's downfall, turned to ash in his memory. He looked around the empty house, understanding with horrible clarity that the woman who'd paid for these walls, this roof, this life he'd taken for granted, she was never coming back. Chitty thought if he ran fast enough, he could undo what he'd done. He was wrong. He burst through the front door of the empty house, chest heaving, sweat soaking through his bank uniform. Adaeze. Adaeze. His voice cracked on her name, desperation making it shrill. He ran from room to room like a madman, throwing open closets he'd already checked, looking under the bed as if she might be hiding there, as if any of this could be a mistake. The bathroom, empty. Her lotions are gone, her perfumes vanished, even the purple toothbrush she'd used for 2 years disappeared. Only his toiletries remained, looking lonely and accusatory on the sink. He pulled out his phone again with shaking hands and tried her number for the 30th time. The number you have dialed is not available. Not switched off. Not out of coverage. Not available. As if the number itself had ceased to exist, as if she'd erased that entire chapter of her life with surgical precision. He called her office next, the office he'd never visited, never asked about, never thought was important. Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, how may I direct your call? Adaeze Okafor, he gasped. I need to speak with Adaeze Okafor. I'm her husband. A pause. A long, weighted pause that felt like judgment. Mrs. Okafor is unavailable, sir. She's currently in meetings following this morning's announcement. Would you like to leave a message? Tell her Chitty called. Tell her it's urgent. Tell her I need to speak with her immediately. Another pause. Sir, I'll pass along your message. The line went dead. He knew, even as he'd said the words, that no message would be passed along. That Adaeze had probably left specific instructions. If my husband calls, tell him I'm unavailable. For 3 days, he existed in a fog of panic and denial. He didn't go to work, called in sick, ignored his supervisor's increasingly irritated messages. He sat in the empty house scrolling through news articles about his wife, learning things about her he'd never known. She had a master's degree from the London School of Economics. How had he not known that? She won the African Energy Sector Negotiator of the Year award 2 years ago under her professional name. She'd spoken at conferences in Dubai, Houston, Geneva. There were photos, Adaeze in business suits he'd never seen, shaking hands with oil ministers, standing before presentation screens showing complex financial projections. This was her life. Her real life.
And he'd known none of it.
Mama Chitty came by on the second day, her face gray, her voice lacking its usual command. Have you heard from her? Have you found her?
No, Mama.
Nothing. They sat together in the sitting room with furniture Adaeze had bought, under a ceiling fan Adaeze had installed, on a floor Adaeze had tiled. The silence between them was new, uncomfortable, filled with unspoken accusations neither dared voice. Finally, Chitty's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered so fast he nearly dropped it. Hello? Adaeze. Mr. Okafor? A woman's voice, young, professional, cold. This is Ngozi, Mrs. Okafor's executive assistant. His heart leaped.
Yes.
Yes, please, I need to speak with. Mrs. Okafor has agreed to see you once. Only once. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Her office in Victoria Island. The address will be sent to this number. Security will be expecting you. Please, Chitty's voice broke. Please tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I was wrong. Tell her, sir. The assistant's voice cut through his pleading like a blade. She's heard enough from you. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Don't be late. The line went dead. Chitty sat there, phone pressed to his ear long after the dial tone began, something cold and finally settling in his stomach. The next afternoon, he stood outside a gleaming high-rise in Victoria Island, staring up at 40 floors of steel and glass. The building had the consortium's logo etched into the marble entrance, West African Energy Alliance. Security guards in crisp uniforms flanked the doors. He'd worn his best suit, the one Adaeze had bought him for a wedding 2 years ago. He'd shaved carefully, styled his hair, practiced what he'd say. None of it felt like enough. The guards checked his ID against a list, their faces professionally neutral, but their eyes knowing. They'd seen the news. Everyone had seen the news. Everyone knew he was the husband who'd somehow not known his wife was about to become one of the most powerful women in Nigeria. 40th floor, sir. Mrs. Okafor's assistant will meet you at the elevator. The elevator ride felt eternal. Soft music played, completely at odds with his hammering heart. The doors opened to a reception area more luxurious than anywhere he'd ever worked. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos, modern art on the walls, leather furniture that probably cost more than his car. Ngozi waited there, clipboard in hand, her expression carefully controlled. Mr. Okafor, follow me please. She led him down a hallway lined with photographs of the signing ceremony, of Adaeze with government officials, of the historic handshake that sealed the merger. Each photo was a reminder of how little he'd known, how completely he'd underestimated her. They stopped at massive wooden doors. Ngozi knocked once, then opened them. "Mr. Okafor is here, Ma." "Send him in." Adaeze's voice. The voice he'd heard say, "I love you" 1,000 times. The voice he'd heard whispered his name in the dark. The voice he'd heard begged him to trust her before he grabbed that bucket. But there was nothing familiar in it now. It was the voice from the press conference. Steady, powerful, untouchable. Chitty stepped into the boardroom, and his knees nearly gave out. The room was massive, a marble table that could seat 20, windows showing Legos spread out below like a kingdom, leather chairs, a presentation screen displaying the consortium's logo. And at the head of the table, in a chair that looked like a throne, sat Adaeze. She'd transformed. Or maybe she'd simply stopped transforming for him. She wore a navy business suit, her hair styled in elegant box braids, minimal jewelry that probably cost more than his monthly salary. But it wasn't the clothes or the hair or the setting that made her unrecognizable. It was her posture. The way she sat, spine straight, shoulders back, chin up. The way she looked at him. Not with anger, not with hurt, but with the cool assessment of someone evaluating a minor business matter. Security stood by the doors. 2 men in dark suits, hands clasped, faces impassive. Her lawyer sat to her right, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes. Her PR manager sat to her left, fingers poised over a laptop. They had witnesses. Of course they had witnesses. She wasn't taking any chances.
"Sit down, Chitty."
He sat, his expensive suit suddenly feeling cheap, his carefully practiced words evaporating. Up close, he could see her clearly. The face he'd kissed, the eyes he'd looked into on their wedding day, the woman he'd promised to honor and protect. She looked at him the way she'd probably look at a disappointing quarterly report.
"You wanted to see me," she said.
Not a question. A statement. Adaeze's his voice cracked. "I was wrong. I'm so sorry. My mother lied. She manipulated. I should have trusted you. You should have asked." Her voice cut through his babbling, quiet but absolute. "Before you grabbed that bucket, before you believed a staged photograph over 3 years of faithfulness, you should have asked." Chitty's tears came then, hot and humiliating. I know. Please, give me another chance. I'll change. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut my mother off completely. I love you, Adaeze. I love you." She reached across the marble table and slid a folder toward him. Divorce papers. Her lawyer had already signed. Her signature line waited, ready. His signature line was blank, waiting. "You didn't pour water on me, Chitty." Her voice remained steady, ancient, like she was carving truths into stone. "You revealed who you've always been. A man who chooses comfort over character. Who would rather humiliate his wife than question his mother. Who loved his ego more than my humanity. I spent 3 years making myself smaller so you could feel bigger. I hid my success to protect your pride. I paid your bills and called it a partnership. I swallowed your mother's poison and called it keeping peace. I convinced myself that protecting you meant protecting us. But that morning, when you grabbed that bucket," she paused, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not pain. Something harder. "You freed me. Because I finally saw the truth. I was never the problem. My success was never the threat. Your insecurity was. And I cannot fix what you refuse to acknowledge. I'll change." Chitty stood abruptly, the chair scraping back. "I swear to you, I'll change. I'll be the man you deserve. The papers are already filed," she continued as if he hadn't spoken. "My lawyers will contact you about asset division. Everything in that house, I paid for it. The mortgage, the furniture, the car registered in your name. My accountants have every receipt. You'll have 30 days to vacate." The room tilted. "Vacate? It's my house, Chitty. I bought it. The deed is in my name. You'll receive fair compensation for your time there, but I'm selling the property. I have no use for it anymore. Security moved forward slightly, a subtle signal. The meeting was ending. Adaeze stood, her lawyer and PR manager standing with her, a united front of female power that made Chitty feel like he was shrinking into the floor. I hope one day you find the courage to become the man you pretended to be, she said, her final words. But that's your journey, not mine. Mine started the moment I walked away from that compound with my head high. And I'm never looking back. She nodded to security. They moved to either side of Chitty, not touching, not threatening, just present. Ma'am, should we escort Mr. Okafor out? Please. She turned away, walking toward the windows, looking out at Lagos. Her city now, her kingdom, her future. Chitty was led from the room like a dismissed employee, past Ngozi's knowing eyes, past the photos of his wife making history while he'd been home planning her humiliation, into the elevator that descended towards street level and irrelevance. The last thing he saw before the boardroom doors closed was Adaeze's silhouette against those massive windows, untouchable, unbreakable, free. And he understood, finally, what he'd lost. Not just a wife. He'd lost a queen who'd spent 3 years pretending to be a servant, so he could pretend to be a king. But Mama Chitty wasn't finished. Desperation makes people shameless. And shamelessness makes people reckless. 2 weeks after the press conference, Mama Chitty sat in the green room of a popular Lagos talk show, her hands twisting a handkerchief, her eyes red-rimmed with carefully practiced tears. She'd spent days planning this. Days calling journalists, granting interviews, spinning a new narrative because the old one had exploded in her face. The neighborhood had turned cold. Her church friends avoided her calls. Even her own sister had called Enugu, voice tight with disappointment. What were you thinking, treating that girl like that? But Mama Chitty hadn't survived her husband's abandonment and 30 years of single motherhood by accepting defeat. If she couldn't control the story, she'd rewrite it. The show's host, Chioma Eze, was known for emotional interviews, for giving people a platform to tell their side. Mama Chitty had pitched herself perfectly. A misunderstood mother-in-law, a victim of malicious rumors, a woman who'd always supported her brilliant daughter-in-law but was now being painted as a villain by social media. We're live in 2 minutes, Ma, a producer said, adjusting her microphone. Mama Chitty nodded, dabbing at her eyes. She'd dressed carefully. Modest Ankara, a simple head tie, no jewelry. She needed to look humble, wounded, and authentic. The lights came up. Chioma's smile was warm, but her eyes were sharp. She knew this would be rated gold. Welcome back. Today we have a very special guest, Mama Chitty, mother-in-law to the now famous Adaeze Okafor. Mama Chitty, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me, my sister. There have been many rumors circulating about your relationship with your daughter-in-law, some quite damaging. You wanted to set the record straight? Mama Chitty's voice trembled perfectly. Chioma, I am heartbroken. Heartbroken. That girl, Adaeze, I loved her like my own daughter. From the day my son brought her home, I welcomed her. I taught her how to cook our family recipes. I prayed for her success. I supported her career. The lies flowed like water, smooth and practiced. These rumors that I mistreated her, that I called her names? Chioma, I don't know where they're coming from. Yes, we had small disagreements. What mother and daughter don't? But I was always proud of her. Always. She produced her phone, swiping to show photographs. They looked intimate, Mama Chitty and Adaeze side by side, both smiling. The audience couldn't see how poorly photoshopped they were, how Adaeze's smile had been copied from one photo and pasted onto another, how the lighting didn't quite match. Look, here we are at Christmas. Here at Easter. Does this look like a woman I hated? She'd also prepared witnesses. Mrs. Adelik, a neighbor from 3 compounds away who Mama Chitty had paid 50,000 Nigerian nairas, appeared via video link. Oh yes, Mama Chitty was always kind to Adaeze. Always cooking for her. Always asking about her work. I never saw any problems. Another neighbor, Mr. Benson, who owed Mama Chitty money and couldn't refuse. Very respectful relationship. Mama Chitty treated that girl like gold. The studio audience murmured sympathetically. Social media began buzzing. Some defending Mama Chitty, others skeptical but willing to consider that maybe the story was more complicated than it seemed. Mama Chitty pressed her advantage, voice breaking. My son, my Chitty, has lost his job now because of this scandal. We've lost everything. Our reputation was destroyed. And for what? Because I cared too much? Because I wanted the best for my son's marriage. Chioma leaned forward, her journalist instincts sensing something off but her ratings instincts wanting more drama. So, you're saying these accusations are completely false? That you've always supported Adeze's career? Completely false. I am not the monster they're making me out to be. I am just a mother who loves her son. The interview went viral within hours. Clips spread across WhatsApp groups, Twitter threads debated whether Mama Chitty deserved sympathy, Instagram stories dissected every word. Some people believed her. After all, weren't mothers-in-law always unfairly blamed? Didn't every story have two sides? The tide was shifting just slightly, just enough. Mama Chitty watched the view counts climb from her modest sitting room in Suralere, a small smile playing at her lips. Maybe this would work. Maybe she could salvage a connection to Adeze's wealth and influence. Maybe there was a way back. She had no idea that across the city, in a crisis management war room in Banana Island, Adeze's team was already preparing the response. Ngozi burst into Adeze's apartment that evening, laptop under her arm, face flushed with anger. Ma, have you seen? Your mother-in-law is on television. She's lying. She's showing fake photos. She's got neighbors lying for her. I saw. Adeze's voice was calm, too calm. She stood by her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at Lagos Lagoon, a glass of wine in her hand. And we destroy it. Adaeze turned, and Ngozi saw something in her face that made her stop. Not anger. Not even satisfaction. Just certainty. Call the PR team. Emergency meeting. Tonight. And Ngozi. Yes, Ma. Tell them to prepare the security footage. All of it. Every frame from the past 6 months. It's time. By midnight, Adeze's PR team had assembled. 5 people with combined decades of experience in crisis management, media relations, and digital strategy. They sat around her dining table, laptops open, the security footage queued and ready. We go nuclear, Adaeze said simply. No half measures.
No carefully worded statements.
We show Nigeria exactly who Mama Chitty is. Her head of PR, Amara, a woman who'd handled scandals for governors and oil executives, nodded slowly. Ma, once we release this, there's no going back. The backlash against her will be severe. Are you prepared for that? Adaeze thought about dirty water soaking through her clothes. About 3 years of insults swallowed in silence. About being called barren, useless, a shawo, while she was building something that would outlast them all. I'm not doing this for revenge, she said quietly. I'm doing this so every woman watching knows that staying silent enables abusers. That protecting your dignity isn't cruel. It's justice. Release it. The next morning, Adeze's official social media accounts posted a statement signed by her legal team and PR firm. We have become aware of false and defamatory statements circulating regarding Mrs. Adaeze Okafor's family relationships. In the interest of truth, transparency, and protecting Mrs. Okafor's reputation, we are releasing the following evidence. The video compilation was devastating. 20 minutes of security camera footage, edited chronologically, showing 6 months of abuse in stark, undeniable clarity. Mama Chitty called Adaeze useless woman while Adaeze cooked dinner. Mama Chitty telling neighbors she's barren, my son deserves better, while Adaeze walked past, pretending not to hear. Mama Chitty staging the photos. The footage showed her across the street from Adaze's office, waiting, watching, clicking her phone the moment Adaeze and Aaron stood close. The audio was crystal clear. I'll show my son who his wife really is. I'll make him see she's just like his father, a betrayer. And then, the final clip. The one that would break the internet. Dawn light filtering into the compound. Adaeze walking in, exhausted, wrapped in her modest fabric. Mama Chitty's voice shrill. "I saw you climbing out of a strange man's car at 3 a.m. Chitty grabbing the bucket, the water cascading over Adaeze's head in slow motion. Mama Chitty's cackling. "A shawo. Useless woman. Disgrace." And Adaeze's quiet, dignified response. "You will remember this day, Chitty. Both of you will remember what you've done." The video ended with a black screen and white text. This is what abuse looks like. This is what systematic dehumanization looks like. This is why women hide their success, shrink their light, and lose themselves trying to keep peace. No more. Within 1 hour, the video had 1 million views. Within 3 hours, 5 million. By evening, 20 million people across Nigeria and beyond had watched Mama Chitty's lies collide with undeniable truth. The internet exploded. Twitter erupted with hashtags. Hashtag Justice for Adaeze, hashtag Toxic In-Laws, hashtag Mama Chitty Exposed. Instagram stories dissected every frame. WhatsApp groups that had defended Mama Chitty yesterday now turned on her with righteous fury. Think pieces appeared in newspapers within hours. Journalists who'd been writing drafts just waiting for this moment. The silent epidemic of in-law abuse in Nigerian marriages. When mothers become manipulators, the psychology of toxic parenting. Adaeze Okafor and the women who hide success to survive. Churches began using the footage in sermons about truth, about cruelty disguised as concern, about the consequences of bearing false witness. Pastor Adaeze at Redeemed Gospel Church, where Mama Chitty had attended for 20 years, devoted his entire Sunday sermon to it. You cannot pour dirty water on God's anointed and expect blessings. You cannot destroy with your tongue and expect favor. Mama Chitty's phone rang incessantly. Journalists requesting comment, former friends calling to express their disgust, strangers who'd found her number leaving voicemails filled with curses and condemnation. She stopped answering after the 50th call. Her sister called from Enugu, voice cold. "You're on your own now. Don't call this house again. I won't have my family associated with a woman who treats people like that." Mrs. Okonkwo, who gleefully delivered the news of Adaeze's success 2 weeks ago, now avoided Mama Chitty entirely, crossing the street when she saw her coming. Even Mrs. Adelik and Mr. Benson, the neighbors who'd lied for her on television, faced backlash, their own communities turning on them for participating in the deception. The talk show that had hosted Mama Chitty issued an apology. "We were deceived by false evidence and regret giving a platform to lies. We stand with Adaeze Okafor and all victims of domestic abuse." Mama Chitty became a meme, a cautionary tale, a symbol of everything wrong with toxic in-law relationships. Her face appeared in skits, in comedy sketches, in educational videos about manipulation and abuse. She wanted to be on television. She'd gotten her wish. Just not the way she'd imagined. 3 months later, the consequences had fully materialized. Chitty had lost his banking position. Not officially because of the scandal, but clients had started requesting different account managers, colleagues had grown uncomfortable, and his performance had deteriorated under the weight of shame. He'd found work eventually, at a much smaller bank, for half his previous salary. He moved out of the Aja house. Adaeze had sold it for 45 million Nigerian nairas, kept what she was owed, and sent him a check for 2 million Nigerian nairas as a share. A generous calculation, given he'd contributed almost nothing. He'd moved back in with his mother in Surulere, the two of them now living in the wreckage they'd created, barely speaking to each other, each silently blaming the other for their spectacular downfall. Mama Chitty existed in isolation. Her church attendance had dropped to nothing. The stares, the whispers, the way people moved away when she sat down had become unbearable. Her market trips were quick, humiliating affairs. Even the traders who'd known her for decades now served her with cold efficiency. No more friendly banter, no more gossip shared over piles of tomatoes. She'd become what she'd always feared, alone, rejected, abandoned. But unlike her husband who'd left by choice, She'd driven everyone away with her own cruelty. Across town, in an entirely different world, Adaeze stood before a crowd of 200 women in a newly opened building in Yaba. The sign above the entrance read, "The Adaeze Foundation for Women's Dignity." It was beautiful, modern architecture, 3 floors, with spaces for legal consultations, job training classrooms, computer labs, a children's play area, and temporary housing for women escaping dangerous situations. She'd poured 100 million Nigerian nairas of her own money into it, matched by corporate sponsors who'd rushed to associate themselves with her story. The opening ceremony was packed with women of all ages. Some in expensive asoebi, some in simple clothes, some with children clinging to their wrappers, all united by shared understanding of what it meant to be diminished, dismissed, devalued. Adaeze stood at the podium, wearing a simple white dress, her natural hair free, her face peaceful in a way it had never been during her marriage. "I stood in dirty water once," she began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "Humiliated in my own home by people I loved. But that water didn't drown me. It washed away the lies I believed about myself. That I needed to shrink. That my success was a threat. That protecting someone else's ego was more important than protecting my soul." Women in the audience nodded, some wiping tears, some holding hands with neighbors they'd just met but already understood. This foundation exists because no woman should have to choose between her dignity and her marriage. Because your worth is not determined by how small you're willing to become. Because the people who truly love you celebrate your light, they don't demand you dim it. The applause was thunderous. Adaeze waited for it to quiet, then gestured to a young woman standing nervously at the side of the stage, mid-20s, holding a toddler on her hip, eyes red from crying but chin lifted with fragile hope. "This is Blessing. She's our first resident. 3 weeks ago, she left a marriage where her husband's family told her she was worthless because she couldn't afford to contribute more money to household expenses, even though she worked 2 jobs while caring for 3 children. They called her lazy. They called her a burden." Sound familiar? More nods, more recognition rippling through the crowd. Today, Blessing received her certificate in digital marketing from our accelerated training program. She starts work next week at a tech company in Lekki, Nigeria Naira 250,000 monthly salary, benefits, childcare support. She has temporary housing here until she saves enough for her own place. And most importantly, Adaeze turned to Blessing, smiling. She has a community that sees her worth. Blessing approached the microphone, voice shaking but determined. "Thank you for showing us we can survive this." "No," she corrected herself, remembering Adaeze's words. "Thank you for showing us we can thrive." The Foundation's first quarterly report was staggering. 500 women helped in 3 months. Legal aid provided to 200 cases of domestic abuse and financial manipulation. Job training completion rate of 87%. Housing requests backed up for 6 months. They'd need to expand already. Corporate partnerships formed with 12 major companies who'd committed to preferential hiring for Foundation graduates. Adaeze's story had done what she'd hoped. Created not just justice for herself, but opportunity for thousands. That evening, Adaeze stood on her Banana Island balcony at sunset, Lagos glowing below her like a city made of amber and gold. Her phone rang, Chief Ogunlai calling with the quarterly numbers. 500 women, Adaeze. In 3 months. Do you understand what you've built? She smiled, looking out at the city that had watched her fall and rise. We'll need more funding. Schedule meetings with potential donors for next week. And Chief, yes? Start looking at property in Abuja and Port Harcourt. If we're doing this, we're doing it nationwide. She hung up, and in the silence that followed, allowed herself to feel the full weight of transformation. Mama Chitty had wanted to destroy her. Instead, she'd freed her. Chitty had wanted to humiliate his wife. Instead, he'd revealed his own character. They'd thought pouring dirty water would wash away her dignity. They hadn't understood that dignity isn't something you can take from someone. It's something you reveal you never had in the first place. Somewhere in Surulere, In a small sitting room growing dark with evening shadows, Mama Chitty sat alone, staring at her phone, at the video that had destroyed her reputation with its truth, at the comments that kept coming, millions of voices telling her what she'd refused to see. That cruelty always costs more than you expect to pay, and the bill always comes due. The universe has a way of making you drink from the same bucket you poured over someone's head. And Mama Chitty was learning, far too late, that some water never washes clean.